Okay, welcome to Sustainable News. Today, World Population Day, and I had a great conversation with Professor Jennifer Sciubba, and she is the writer of the book 8 Billion and Counting. First, however, some other news, some is positive and some is negative. And if you like this program, then there's two buttons there, like and subscribe. Please hit those. Thank you. So Newsweek is talking about the world's most eco-friendly countries, and they are taking in account the combating of climate change, renewable energy, amount of green space, air quality, water quality, housing affordability, inequalities, educational attainment, levels of poverty, and labor rights. So anyway, top three. First of all, Costa Rica, and this is for protecting biodiversity, conservation, and renewable energy. Number two, Denmark for biodiversity, air quality, greenhouse gas reductions, and renewable energy. And number three is Sweden for renewable energy and green steel. Okay, negative news or positive news, politics. In the UK, I'm in the UK, Boris Johnson has resigned. What will that mean for investments into fossil fuels over the next coming years? We'll find out hopefully soon. Euronews is saying that billions of euros in aid for the poorest countries are being rerouted into climate finance. And this comes from the latest report from humanitarian aid organization, that's CARE Denmark. Well, that actually brings me to the following. European Parliament has backed plans to label gas and nuclear energy as what they call green. So what this means is that some gas and nuclear projects could be included in the EU taxonomy of environmentally sustainable economic activities. In essence, what that means is that the European Parliament is saying fossil gas, nuclear is green. Investment in these areas should be seen as sustainable investments. Now, why is that controversial? Why is that bad? Well, there are a number of reasons. First of all, you can listen to my interview with Angus Wong. He's a campaign strategist at Some of Us, and he talked with me about what's happening in Canada with so-called sustainable investments made by the banking industry. And he called it a very dangerous path to go down. So that's one reason. Other reason is the headline right here. Basically, Russia's war against Ukraine is paid for by fossil fuels. And Russia's energy minister is very happy. He already said that the EU's green taxonomy offers a range of opportunities. So are they also forgetting about disasters? Chernobyl, or maybe it's a long time ago, 1986. Maybe you say that wouldn't happen again. Well, actually, 11 years ago, not that long ago, 2011, we had the Fukushima nuclear disaster in Japan. Anyways, a lot of people are talking about it. Greta Thunberg, you've heard of her, Swedish climate activist. She called the decision on Wednesday hypocrisy. Two countries, Austria, Luxembourg, will take the Commission to the European Court of Justice. All right then, World Population Day. It's a day dedicated to focusing on the importance of population issues, and we have a world population of 8 billion. Is that just too much? Well, I read an article, global population is crashing, soaring and moving, and they are quoting, and I was very grateful to be speaking with Professor Jennifer Sciubba. She is Associate Professor of International Studies at Rhodes College, and she's a writer of the book 8 Billion and Counting. So, quite a few questions I asked Professor Sciubba, and I quote from the article, the 21st century is less a story about exponential population growth than it is a story about differential growth, and it's marked by a very stark divide between the world's poorest and the world's richest countries. Can you expand on that?
Sure. So I think what we are used to, and I'm going to give the we here as people who are adults these days. I mean, I can go with that broad strokes. We are used to thinking about population in terms of the world is really growing. And if you're environmentally minded, like we are, and I teach environmental politics, you tend to put that in conversation with what you know about environmental changes worldwide. And so I think the prevailing wisdom is we're growing so much, and so much of our literature is about that. That's because we were growing so rapidly. That was absolutely true. So last century, we started with a world of 1.6 billion and ended with 6.1 billion. That's a tremendous growth. And a lot of the countries in the world, most countries in the world had in common similar population dynamics. It's where we get this term about population pyramids, where you look at a snapshot of a population and they were all shaped like pyramids because they were young and growing. But this century is really different. And I know that our mentality has not caught up with those changes. And we really need to start shifting our conversation to this new world. This moment is about differential demographic dynamics, and that's in all three drivers: fertility, mortality, migration are three ingredients. Or as I say in the book, sex, death, and migration, right? It's much easier to remember that way. The world's more wealthy countries are shrinking. I mean, we have dozens and dozens of countries that are shrinking. I was counting the other day, and it was over 40 countries with shrinking populations. That's not something I think we really think about. And so at the other end of the sex, death, and migration spectrum, we do still have lots of young and growing countries. And so I would say this first 20 years, the first couple of decades of this century, is really about that differential growth. But one of the things that surprised me as I wrote the book was how my own mind shifted, which is good. We should keep updating our assumptions. That I actually think we're at a turning point now going forward, where we really need to think about this whole, it's a small world after all, because there really are not that many young and growing countries anymore. So that's an even greater mindset shift than just thinking about differential dynamics.
Okay, you focus very much on immigration. Europe's population is set to shrink from about 521 million to about 482 million. That's by mid-century. And I believe I read that immigrants could replace the retiring workers.
My bottom line on immigration that I really want to push is that immigration is not inevitable. It's not some tide that washes over countries. And that choice is also related to these sex and death dynamics. So we know it's talk about projections. It's very obvious that countries will be shrinking because there's more deaths than births. That's where we already are. So that leaves you that third ingredient. What do you choose as a society? Do you choose to say, okay, we're going to adapt to this new reality, the same way that a country might adapt to climate change, because we have to adapt to our surroundings. Countries that are, one example of that would be Japan. Japan says, okay, we are going to go down that path. Other countries might say, we're going to do what we can to supplement our labor force through short-term migration, non-permanent migration. Look at the Gulf states there, for example. Other countries might choose another path, which is to say, let's open up our immigration, allow permanent settlement. But even with permanent settlement of immigrants, it's not like a bunch of babies just come to the US. People who immigrate tend to be adults. And actually, in many cases, they're often older on average than the average of the population. So they don't necessarily reverse this trend of population aging and shrinking. But if you're Europe and other countries, countries within Europe and other places in the world that are facing aging and shrinking, the debates on immigration, they're not going anywhere. In fact, they're only going to become more intense as the backdrop changes. I don't think it's inherently bad. I mean, I like I said, I don't think there's any trend that's inherently good or bad. It's really what you make of it. But I don't think we have to have quite so much fear about it. I think there's a lot of reasons to see it as a really good thing. Certainly, if we are feeling comfortable as a society that the children we have are going to grow up and live long lives, so we have fewer of them, that's a sign things are going well.
Okay, you mentioned on LinkedIn, and I quote once again, you may have heard the term overpopulation before, but the idea that the Earth is reaching capacity is actually flawed.
Yeah, I think, we were talking about this, what's different from last century to this century. And I think it is very convenient for us to keep pushing the line that Earth has reached its carrying capacity, or it's going to reach its carrying capacity, and therefore we need to change our reproduction patterns. I think that's really convenient because it's a well-worn argument, but it is incredibly flawed and I think really dangerous as well. And that's because the only places on Earth where there are people having more babies than replacements are in poorer non-Western countries. So if you are a Westerner who really cares about climate change and you want to invoke this population argument, what you're really saying is, hey, it's not on us. You guys over there need to quit having so many babies. And that just excuses you to keep living the way you're living, when really what's driving our, climate change is our consumption. It's the ways that we are living. I'm an optimist about the future. World population growth is slowing tremendously. And I think we're all having more secure, higher quality lives. But we need to think about what do we do with that? How do we use what we have to shape the future? And then, of course, we do need to recognize it's not great for everybody everywhere. So as more and more countries do have this lower fertility and higher quality of life, I think we risk the tendency that we'll forget that there are places on the planet, including those 8 countries with 5 children or more on average per woman, where life quality is not great. And people would love to have greater opportunities for education and meaningful employment and political participation. And so, making sure we remember that diversity of experiences is really important.